Welcome to Countercurrents. I'm Larry Johnson. Today we're going to talk with Mazin Qumsiyeh, a Palestinian activist, someone working diligently to promote the rights and the freedom of the Palestinian people. I hope you are informed and educated from this exchange. Can't say that it's to be enjoyable because what the Palestinian people are going through is a living hell. Thanks for watching. Mazin, thank you for staying up so late to do this. I know that it's as late where you are. Why don't you, people watching this, you're not a publicly known figure around the world yet, at least. But you've been very active in writing and promoting the cause of the Palestinian people. So tell us who you are.
Okay, well, very briefly, I'm one of 15 million Palestinians in the world. 8.5 million of us are refugees or displaced people. I am one of the people, as they say. And I have been lucky in my life in the sense that I was born in a village that has not been demolished when over 530 Palestinian villages and towns were demolished, destroyed, people ethnically cleansed. My grandmother is from Nazareth, but my other three grandparents are from Beit Sahur, this village, which is the shepherd's field where the shepherds heard the angels tell them to go up the hill to Bethlehem, where I am now. Bethlehem and my village are only 1 kilometer apart, walking distance. So anyways, my family is Palestinian Christian family. I got my education in the US in terms of higher degrees, master's and PhD in medical genetics. And I worked at universities like Duke and Yale and the University of Tennessee. And then I came back to Palestine in 2008, where I established institutions, including this Palestine Institute for Biodiversity and Sustainability. And this institute is interested in sustainable human and natural communities. And I've been, since coming back to Palestine in 2008, I've been a full-time volunteer, 7 days a week, 16 hours a day, working on for the cause, not just the cause of Palestine, because Palestine is just a small thing compared to global challenges. It's pivotal in many ways, and a global war could start because of Palestine, as we saw recently. But still, we have other challenges like climate change, habitat destruction, pollution, other things that I work on. So I work on many causes, but they all center around sustainable human and natural communities.
Well, what has happened to the Palestinian Christian community used to be very large and robust. What has happened to it?
It's been devastated over the past few decades, thanks to the colonization of Palestine. Yes, Palestine actually has been always, by the way, for many thousands of years, multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-religious, and even multilingual society. 44 languages were spoken in Palestine before 1948. But the three dominant religions here were in the order Muslims, and I'm talking about the past 1600 years, Muslims who constituted about 80% of the population, Christians who were between 10 and 15% of the population, and Jews who were about 3% of the population. This was the case for the past 1600 years, and it has dramatically shifted since 1948, of course, because Israel was created on the land of Palestine. Many Christian and Muslim villages were ethnically cleansed, as I mentioned, destroyed, and people made refugees. And the remaining population is very much embattled and lives under an apartheid system that forces people to migrate and leave. And already, hundreds of thousands of people left the Palestine, basically. They left Palestine by economic pressure, even not by the ethnic cleansing that happened in 1948, 1967, and beyond, and now happening in Gaza. Of course, Gaza is being ethnically cleansed and genocided, I might add. So 3 churches in Gaza were destroyed, 800 mosques in Gaza were destroyed. Christians and Muslims have been killed in rough proportion to their population among Palestinians in relation to their ratio among Palestinians. They were ethnically cleansed also in the same proportion as they were. So, for example, before 1948, as I mentioned, 10 to 15% of all Palestinians were Christians. And if you look at the refugees after 1948, between 1948 and 1950, hundreds of thousands of refugees were pushed out of the country. You will find that the Christian population among refugees was the same proportion as. So the Zionists did not distinguish. If you're not Jewish, you're discriminated against, whether you're Muslim, Christian, Druze, Baha'i, whatever, you're atheist, as long as you're not Jewish, you are discriminated against and you are ethnically cleansed.
Do the Zionist authorities come around and demand papers? Because you can't, just looking at a person, you can't necessarily say that, hey, this person's Jewish, this person's Christian, this person's Muslim, unless dressed in a particular, like the Haredi would be visibly, Jewish, dressed up like that.
No. I mean, let's take 1948, when most of the refugees, our ancestors, the refugees, were made 3 generations ago now. In 1948, the Zionist forces, the Haganah and the Irgun, they mapped out every single Palestinian village and town, and they knew where are the Palestinians, Christians and Muslims. So they went and bombed those villages and committed massacres in them. For example, in Deir Yassin, which is largely Muslim village, although had some Christians, they massacred the people of Deir Yassin. They massacred the people of Tantura because there's no Jews in Tantura to massacre, and they don't want to massacre Jews. So they committed 33 massacres in April and May 1948 to drive the population out. And they knew exactly where we are and who we are. And then in 1967, of course, Israel occupied the West Bank and Gaza. So they gave us, apartheid ID cards. I have one here, I can show you even. This is the apartheid card. It's a green card that allows me to live in the West Bank as a Palestinian Christian. This is a different ID card than the one issued for Jewish Zionists, for others. So there's racism like existed in apartheid South Africa, although in apartheid South Africa, of course, you could tell who's Zulu, black, and who is Afrikaner by the color of their skin. Here, you had to distinguish them by some other features. And so, yes, ID cards, identification, location, family names, obvious. Somebody named Muhammad is obviously a Muslim. Somebody named Peter is obviously a Christian, or Paul or something like that.
Yeah.
So it was very clear, and they could easily distinguish because everybody must have an ID card, whether before 1948 under the British or after 1948 under the Zionist oppression.
Did growing up, did you live close to Jews and close to Muslims, and who did you find it easiest to get along with?
Well, let me put it this way. Historically, my grandfather, of course, lived with Jews, Christians, Muslims, Baha'i, Druze. As I said, Palestine was multi-ethnic, multi-religious, multicultural before 1948. That was the society. They went to the same schools. My grandfather's friend in school was Jewish. He was Christian. Other friends he has were Muslims. So we have no distinction between religions here before 1948, before the Zionist project took over. The Zionist project had a different idea. The Zionist project is about segregation. And it didn't actually start in 1948. The first segregation apartheid laws were instituted under the British when they took over Palestine in 1919 after the First World War. They appointed the Zionist Jew by the name of Herbert Samuel. And Herbert Samuel segregated schools here, public schools I'm talking about. I mean, I don't mind private schools, having Catholic private school, or Jewish private school or whatever, or a Muslim private school. But segregating the public schools here happened under the Jewish Zionist appointed by the British in 1920-21. And hence there was starting of segregation. How did they segregate? They said the public schools will have two kinds of public schools. One, Jewish public schools run by the Zionist movement to brainwash Jews about their superiority and their right to the land and all of this stuff. And then the second group of schools will be groups of schools for the rest, the non-Jews, who were the majority, of course, the Muslims, the Christians, the Baha'i, the Druze. We all went to the same schools under the British from 1920, not me personally, but I'm talking about.
You don't look that old.
But between 1920 to 1948, public schools were mixed, except for the Jewish public schools, which were segregated because of the Zionist desire to have a separate state and have segregation and racism. After 1948, the country was divided against our will, against the will of the indigenous people of Palestine. Part of it was, 78% of it was made the Jewish state, and 22% of it, the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, were left out of the Jewish state. And I was born in the West Bank in the 1950s, 1957 to be precise. In 1957, when I was born, and continued until 1967, of course, under Jordanian rule, the schools were mixed. Anybody is welcome to public schools. And we continued to live like we lived before in 1948. The only areas we didn't continue to live like we did before 1948 were the areas under Israeli control, which were the 78% of Israel, of the land of Palestine that became known as the State of Israel. In 1967, Israel occupied the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, and the Sinai and the Golan Heights.
Right.
This is the expansion. So Israel came to us as an occupying power, but not only as an occupying power, but as a colonizing power, repeating what they have done in the 1948 areas and the rest of Palestine, repeating it in the West Bank. So the answer to your question is Israel caused the segregation of Jews from non-Jews here. Israel insists on it. And Israel not only is segregating against us, unlike South Africa, which was interested in creating Bantustans for the black people and keeping them as indentured laborers, etc., in the mines and so on. In our case, Israel doesn't want us in this country, period. So
Yeah.
they've been ethnically cleansing us. That's why we have, as I said, 8.5 million Palestinian refugees, Christian, Muslims, Baha'i, Druze, etc. But in terms of like here, I am in Bethlehem now. Bethlehem and my village, Beit Sahur. I take my village. My village, Beit Sahur, is 12,000 people. 70% are Christian, 30% Muslim. That's my village.
Yeah.
Okay. But my village has lost most of its land to Jewish colonizers who came here in 1967, occupied the West Bank, took over the land, kicked us out of the land, and squeezed us as a village, squeezed Bethlehem as a town, took most of the land, established Jewish-only colonies because they believe in segregation. So Jewish-only colonies established on stolen Palestinian land. Similar to what happened in North America, the Europeans were not interested in integrating the indigenous people and their communities. They're interested in creating white-only communities. And the indigenous people are looked at as like lepers, you know, you don't want them. And in fact, you read the old books, like some of the Indians still try to sneak into our towns, you know. These are the towns built on the ruins of the indigenous people, you know. Same thing here, you know. Israel took most of the land, the best lands, the best agricultural fields, the best cities like Jaffa and Haifa, all of them, Nazareth, every city is. Jerusalem now is taken over. You know, it had Jews. I'm not disputing that there were Jews in Jerusalem. There were native indigenous Jews in Jerusalem, but they were a minority as they were in the rest of Palestine.
Right.
And so we welcome Jews, Christians, Muslims, anybody, you know, wants to live here. Also, immigrants, we welcome immigrants. We don't have a problem with immigrants. For example, we have an Armenian quarter in Jerusalem. We Palestinians welcome the Armenians. Why? They are persecuted in their country. They're welcome to come to our country and become native like us. After a few decades, they learn the language, they become native, and they're like us. We have no problem with immigrants. We do have a problem with somebody who says, nice multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-religious society you have here, but I don't like that, and I want to make it a Jewish state with one language, one culture, one religion, one flag that has a Star of David, everything.
Yeah.
That's what we want. And that's the problem. That's the essence of the problem.
What was the first language that you spoke?
I'm sorry?
Well, what was your first language? What did you grow up speaking? What did you learn to speak?
Arabic, of course.
Arabic. Okay. So,
which is, by the way, Arabic is a modified language of Proto-Aramaic. The alphabet, the Arabic alphabet, evolved from the Aramaic alphabet that Jesus spoke.
Right.
And my ancestors spoke Aramaic fully. And even now, the language that I speak is mixed Arabic-Aramaic, because there's evolution of languages. So Proto-Aramaic evolved into Arabic and Hebrew and Assyrian, Syrian Aramaic, and other languages.
Mazin, can you, looking back at the history of your family, your heritage, your genealogy, was there a time when any of your ancestors did not live there on that land?
Never.
Yeah. And so my point in asking that is Ambassador Mike Huckabee, who Donald Trump has nominated to be ambassador to Israel, said that there is no such thing as Palestine.
Of course,
How
that's the
how
Zionist story.
how would you, if you had a chance to sit with him in a room without punching him in the face, okay? I mean, you might be tempted to do so, but if you could sit down and talk to him man to man,
Well,
what
I
would you
would
say? What would you say to him?
just to answer that point, I will bring him a stack of research papers like this thick that shows genetically Palestinians today are not distinguishable. By and large, 99% of our genes, whether we are Palestinian Muslims, Christians, Jews, or Baha'i, Palestinian, Christians, Muslims, Jews, or Baha'i, that our genes are indistinguishable from the genes of the Canaanites that lived here a few thousand years ago, our ancestors, or from the genes of Homo sapiens that migrated out of Africa through this land and inhabited this land continuously for the past 100 to 150,000 years. We're the indigenous people of the land. What is he talking about?
Yeah.
Indigenous people of the land acquired different languages and different religions and different ideas. But the stock, the main stock of the indigenous people is still, I'm a medical geneticist, by the way. I'm not talking like this out of the blue.
Yeah.
This is I used to be a professor in the genetics department at Yale Medical School. So I know what I'm talking about. If you take my DNA today or the DNA of a Muslim person here in my institute, and you analyze it and you compare it to the DNA of people at the time of Jesus, what do you find? They are descendants. So this notion that somehow the Palestinians came out of the blue, where they come up with this?
Yeah.
No?
Well, I think, as you know,
Even in the Bible, by the way, the Bible, if you look at the Bible, Jesus in the New Testament, it says in Jerusalem, what was he meeting? What kind of people was he meeting? Samaritans, Arabs, Philistines.
Yeah.
These are tribes of Canaanites, by the way, tribes of Canaanites. That no more and no less. So where did these people go? They disappeared. They suddenly vanished off the face of the earth. The ones who were around Jesus, or the family of Mother Mary, the mother of Jesus. Where did those people go? Did they disappear? No, some of them were Jewish, some of them were adopted Christianity, some of them later adopted Islam and adopted the classical Arabic language, while most of us kept the Aramaic language in our mix of the colloquial language and so forth. That's what it is. And there's a mountain of evidence, not just the genetic evidence. I have a mountain of other evidence from archaeology, from history, archaeologists, even Zionist archaeologists, even Israeli archaeologists don't say this anymore. Huckabee and those guys, I don't know. We are at a stage in the world history where there is evil among us, and the evil uses dumb people.
Yeah.
Who are willing to be bought for a handful of dollars, and that's it.
Well, let me give you another of what I call excuse or justification for allowing this, genocide against the Palestinians to go on. They'll say, well, the Arabs don't want them. Well, could it be that the Arabs don't want you because you're not Arab genetically? Would that be an accurate statement?
What?
The criticism frequently is offered that the Palestinians have had every chance to be incorporated. Why don't they just go to Jordan? Why don't they live with the Arabs? And the question I would ask you is, one of the reasons you don't go with the Arabs is genetically the Palestinian people are not Arabs, correct?
Arab, what does the word Arab mean? Arab means anybody who speaks the Arabic language. It's not a genetic predisposition.
Very good.
Okay.
I mean, that's the point I'm wanting to get out of you. Okay.
It's not an ethnicity. Arab is somebody who speaks the Arab language. Somebody who speaks the English language is English, okay? You know, if I come to England today and say, here, you get out of here, and you can go to another English-speaking country. Why not go to Australia and America? Because it's another English-speaking country. You know, there's no genetic similarity between me and an Arab-speaking person in Tunisia or Morocco.
Right.
So I'm Algerian in genetics, okay? We're not ethnically related to them. We speak the same language, but we're not related to them. And why would we want to abandon our country and go live in somebody else's country?
Right.
What is that got to do? If that is the case, why not ask the, I don't know, Spanish-speaking Jews here, for example, if they speak Spanish, well, go live in Spain, you know?
Yeah.
After all, you speak Spanish. You know, what has that got to do with anything? It is not relevant to the question of refugee rights. International law is very, very clear. There's something called the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Article 13 says everybody has a right to leave their country and come back to their country. That means everybody, Palestinian, left their country, they have a right to come back to their country, not go live in somebody else's country, go live in Lebanon or Syria or Jordan or other countries. These have their own indigenous people, and God bless them if they help the refugees and whatever, but they are not related to the problem that was created by colonialists pushing us out. If the British who came to New Zealand, what they called New Zealand, it was called Aotearoa. The Maori lived in Aotearoa. Well, the Maori linguistically are associated with Polynesian tribes that came to Aotearoa, or what became known as New Zealand, about 1,000 or 1,500 years ago. So if the British said, well, you speak language similar to the Polynesian islands in the Pacific, go live in those islands, we want your island. Is this a logical inference that just because they speak linguistically related, that somehow, and even in that case, they actually came from there 1,000 or 1,500 years ago. But in our case, we didn't come from Arabia or from Egypt or from anywhere else. We were in Palestine, as I mentioned, for thousands of years. Our heritage, our culture, you can look at cultural heritage. You can even look at the embroidered clothes of the Palestinian movement. They have the same symbols that are found in the embroidered clothes of Canaanitic women 4,000 or 5,000 years ago. So, including even some symbolism of the sun and the star and the moon, because they used to worship these gods a few thousand years ago, so they kept the designs on their clothes. So to say that somehow because we speak Arabic, this means we should go away to any other Arabic-speaking country is just as ridiculous as saying, the Native Americans should be cleared out because we want the country and all these Native Americans can be scooted in one reservation. Doesn't matter, they speak different languages, but they are related to each other somehow. So they should be scooted in reservations.
What is the your perception of the Palestinian Authority, vice entities like Hamas? Now, I think you understand, having lived in the United States, the average American views Hamas as this vicious terrorist organization. I took the time to actually look up the statistics on the attacks attributed to Hamas, and was frankly shocked to discover that the Israeli Foreign Ministry, who collects this data, recorded very, very, very few actual attacks by Hamas. It was you could all most of the attacks I would put up there with what I'd call Hatfield and McCoy. In the United States, you had these two families in West Virginia that were feuding with each other over land. So a lot of the violence attributed to Hamas has been violence of fighting with the Israeli settlers over land. What has been your experience in navigating this political gap between the Palestinian Authority, who persecute Palestinians, and groups like Hamas?
Again, using analogies, one can understand how these things work, because colonialism is very common, and there's lots of examples of colonialism and response to colonialism, including resistance to colonialism historically. Whether we take South Africa or we take something closer, let's say the United States. The United States, there was resistance to colonialism, and there were people like Sitting Bull, and there were people like, all these people, and General Custer and their fights, the last stand against those invasions. And, what did the colonizers do? The colonizers, very simple. They want the land. They don't want the people who come with the land. It's as simple as. So obviously, you cannot do this nicely. You cannot come to somebody's land and say, hey, I like your house and land. Would you kindly please move away so that I can take it free and do whatever I want with it? No, you have to use violence. So violence is intrinsic to colonization. Violence is intrinsic to colonization. And always, in every situation, whether it's Brazil or Mexico or the United States or even Canada or even South Africa or any colonization structure, the number of civilians, if you want to use that terminology, killed, I'm not sure definition of civilian. Again, people can argue with it. Let's not argue about that. Let's say the number of white people killed in South Africa compared to black people killed in South Africa. It's always 1 to 10. Colonizers,
Yes.
Not 1 to 10. In South Africa, it was 1 to 15. In North America, it was 1 to 100. In Palestine, it was 1 to 20 or 15 or something like that.
Yeah.
So one colonizer is killed for every 20 or 50 or 100 indigenous people killed. That's the nature of the beast.
Yeah.
That's the nature of the diagnosis of colonialism. We can talk about the details, briefly about the Palestinian factions and all this stuff. Now, when you say violence is intrinsic to colonization, colonizers have one tool to use, which is violence. The colonized people, they have a group of tools. Most of their resistance is nonviolent resistance. Most of our resistance, Palestinian resistance, is non-armed resistance.
Right.
We call popular resistance. I wrote a book about the subject, by the way, called Popular Resistance in Palestine, A History of Hope and Empowerment, where I detail this history of non-armed resistance. But of course, there's armed resistance in any situation, any colonial situation. Remember the IRA, even in Northern Ireland, there's indigenous Americans, natives, Sioux or Apache or others who fought by arms. Some of them didn't fight by arms. Some fought by arms.
Remember, that was the history of the United States. I have 28 ancestors who fought in the Revolution as militia against the British.
Right.
So I come from a long line of terrorists.
Yeah, it's natural to have that. It's natural to have different people resist by different methods. In South Africa, there were 32 factions fighting the apartheid regime, the colonial apartheid regime. Some of them, like Nelson Mandela, believed only in armed resistance, by the way. Some of them, like Desmond Tutu and his faction, believed only in non-armed resistance. Some were mixed, etc. But that's natural. As a biologist, I describe things as what they are, not what my preference is and what my wishful thinking is. And you cannot find a single colonial, anti-colonial struggle which is devoid of armed resistance, or which is all one kind of resistance or another kind of resistance. There's always a mix. That's, again, natural because different people have different backgrounds. Having said that, again, yes, there are 12 Palestinian factions. Hamas is just one of them. There's Islamic Jihad. There's a Popular Front for Liberation of Palestine. There's Fatah, which is now the Palestinian Authority. Basically, Fatah has finished as a movement and is now subsumed in the Palestinian Authority, which acts as a Vichy government, like French government under Nazi occupation, that helps the Israeli occupiers. This is natural, also natural, and not again in the sense that I like one or the other. It's just natural to describe the spectrum that's there. And the question, like in South Africa, was, well, how do you get these factions to stop doing what they are doing, whether it's armed resistance or peaceful resistance or anything? Well, you have to stop the cause of the of the problem.
Yeah.
The cause of the problem is the colonization and the oppression and the ethnic cleansing. That's how you stop it, not by pontificating about whether Hamas did this right or wrong, or Fatah did this right or wrong, or anything else. That is natural to have that diversity of factions. Israel itself has a diversity of populations and factions. Some of them are calling for dropping nuclear bombs on Gaza to finish it off quicker than what they are doing, which is carpet bombing, etc. Some of them are calling for some sort of arrangement of a two-state solution or peace. Some of them call for one state, democratic state, and abandoning Zionism. So different Jews also have different ideas. That is also natural to have that diversity within a colonizing oppressor society. And we have to remember in North America also, there were whites who helped the indigenous native people, tried to prevent additional harm to them.
Right.
As there were also whites who helped with the slavery, the rail tracks running slaves to the north, etc. That is natural also to have the variety within the colonizing or the oppressive society.
Yeah. Did when you look at the regional actors, Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, Egypt, and the principal ones around Palestine, with the fall of Bashar al-Assad, do you see that as having any negative effect, positive effect, any effect whatsoever on the Palestinian cause, or is it just, it's another thunderstorm in the night, but it's not going to change the desert?
Well, I mean, the Arab world, if you want to use that terminology, the Arabic-speaking countries around us, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, all these countries, they were created, their borders were created by the colonizers, by the British and the French, primarily, Americans secondarily, before 1945, and then the US took on the mantle of empire, so they became the dominant force in our region as they are in other parts of the world, the policemen of the world, if you want. And those imperial powers, France, England, the US, were not interested in democracy or human rights or economic development of the countries. That's the last thing they were interested in. They're not interested in it at all. There's plenty of evidence on this. For example, supporting the butcher rulership of Saudi Arabia, as it's called, named after a family. Imagine a country named after a family. So they basically, the British installed this family of basically raiders of caravans. They were this family used to just, that's how their living is, raiding caravans going to Mecca. And they put them in charge of Saudi Arabia, called the country Saudi Arabia, was called Hijaz before that. So they created all these monsters, all these dictators in our countries, in the world in general, in all these countries. Not just here, but also in Latin America, if you remember, with Chile and, Allende and all this stuff. So anyways, they want these dictators who are friendly to interests of the West, being mostly natural resources like oil and gas and gold and whatever. In the Congo, it was, Belgium in the Congo for the chocolates, committed genocide. Namibia, Germans in Namibia, or Italians in Libya, or France in Algeria. They were interested in natural resources, rich country, and pillaging it, basically. And that's what they did, and they continue to do. And so, yes, I'm not very unhappy about the removal of this dictator, Bashar al-Assad, who is also like the other dictators, Western appointed, Western groomed. But it is the only thing that the reason they removed him, by the way, the reason they went after him in 2011 and pumped in billions of dollars, mostly Saudi and Emirati money and Qatari money, to remove him from power starting in 2011, was because he was allowing Iranian weapons to cross from Syria to Lebanon to empower the Islamic resistance movement in Lebanon, Hezbollah. So that is why they asked him to stop it, and he wouldn't. He couldn't really, because if he did, then he would lose his people. Many of them supported this. And he would be toppled easier. No, and they didn't like him. His people didn't like him, but this would have added another reason to remove him. So anyways, but they ended up succeeding in removing him with the help of the Turkish and the Ottomans and the Israeli intelligence and the American weapons and money, and Saudi money and weapons, and many, many other countries. There's at least 15 countries that delved into it. So to make it brief, and by the way, I have to leave shortly. I don't know how much more. The aspect of what's happening geopolitically here is very clear. There's Iran, Russia, China on one side. There's Israel, NATO, and the United States on the other side. Each is vowing for influence on our region because of its rich natural resources. And we, the people, are being eaten alive and genocided because of this power struggle. And so Israel is building an empire, a small empire. The US is building a bigger empire. They have built already world hegemony. They took most of the continental United States and went to Hawaii and Philippines. And now Trump wants to get Greenland.
Greenland, Panama.
and Canada, by the way.
Canada.
Forget Canada. Canada should be annexed to the U.S. So that's an empire still thinking of empire building. Israel already occupied South Syria. Turkey already occupied North Syria. And Israel already occupied, went to near Damascus.
Yeah, southwest.
But it was ruled by this Islamist, ISIS person, Ahmad Shara, who is not very keen on democracy or human rights or anything else. But he's friendly to the West and willing, just like the Taliban were friendly to the West. But I warn the United States, like happened with the Taliban, you support them first because they were against the Soviet Union. You supported Ahmad Shara because he was against the Bashar al-Assad regime. But you create monsters, and those monsters come back to bite you.
Yeah.
So it is not the best approach.
So, Mazin, how can people support you, support the Palestinian cause? What's the best way? Or what can they read, and what do you recommend that they follow you on?
Well, first of all, they have to realize that they don't need to support me. They need to support all of the Palestinian cause. There is a war on the people of the world, not just our people. There's a war on the people of earth, on the Syrians, on the Lebanese, on the Palestinians, on the Americans. I mean, look at the fires in California. Look at what's happening. That's related all to greed, by the way. Climate change is related to greed. Wars are related to greed. The U.S. spent $850 billion just on its military annually. A fraction of that would cure hunger in the U.S. and homelessness in the U.S. So they need to pay attention that there's a war on the people and that our enemies, your enemies and my enemies are the same. They are those greedy rich people like Netanyahu, like Biden, like Trump, like Mahmoud Abbas here, a Palestinian Authority. Those are our enemies. Our enemies are not a particular creed or religion or anything. In fact, those people don't believe in any creed or religion other than the almighty greenback.
Yes.
This is what they believe in. And it's greed that drives them, and that drives them to the destruction of our planet. And it is a shared planet. There's no such thing as a Palestinian cause separate from a Syrian cause or an American cause or a Native American cause. We're all connected. I mean, and you can see the evidence of this everywhere. For example, Black Lives Matter pointed out very clearly that the American policemen are being trained by Israeli soldiers, militarizing American police. And not only militarizing them and incorporating racism in their education.
Actually, I'd point out that it was more U.S. training Israelis than Israelis training U.S. police, because I was involved with the Anti-Terrorism Assistance Training Program. And just as a side comment, we also provided training to Palestinians, the Palestinian Authority.
There's that.
The Palestinian Authority were more professional, more competent than the Israelis we trained. I'll just put that as a side note.
Yeah. No, I agree. There's also, training from the other direction. But there is some training by Israeli security to American policemen. And American police chiefs came to Israel even more recently, like two or 3 years ago, to get to see how they combat, quote unquote, terrorism.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. They shouldn't have done a complete waste of time. The Israeli firearms training, just as an example, is ridiculous. they're very inadequate in what they're training, and yet they tout themselves as best in the world. But that's a little of a sidelight. What is your website? Is there a website that we should direct people to?
People can get to connect with me at my website, qumsiyeh.org. It's my last name, QUMSIYEH.org, or at PalestineNature.org, which is the website of our institute, the Palestine Institute for Biodiversity and Sustainability.
Okay. Listen, I thank you for your time. I know you've got a lot going on. We need to get you out on more social media. I think you have an important voice worth hearing, and certainly with your experience and your background, people would learn a lot from you. Mazin, thank you for your time, my friend.
Thank you very much, my friend. Thanks, Larry. Take care.
God bless.
Thanks.